Hello gang, Tattooed Biker here with you. And tonight, I've got 4 shocking, true cryptid encounter stories from viewers just like you. First, a Missouri woman recalls an encounter with what she calls a monster near her childhood home. Next, a family living in an Iowa farm is stalked by an unidentified creature in the woods. And then a witness and friend are walking through a local cemetery in Rossville, Illinois, when they observe something moving through the headstones. And finally, a former police officer in Laredo, Texas, reports a creature sighting along the roadway while driving home one night. If these are the kind of stories that get your engine running, then grab your boots and let's ride.
Number 1. Dear Biker, I recently attended my high school reunion and chatted with my old neighbor and best friend, Ash. She said, "Do you remember that pig-faced monster that we saw?" I looked at her with shock as the horrible memory flooded back. I must have been so terrified that I blocked it out, but when she said it, yes, I remembered. We used to live on a secluded dirt road. Well, in the middle of a 40-acre plot, away from a secluded dirt road. Our property joined a huge state park at the back, some 25 miles from the nearest town in Missouri. We were about 16, so this would have happened around 2003. We were babysitting our younger siblings, so it was just us and 4 younger ones. Our parents were out for the night. Now, obviously, we were no strangers to the woods. We knew the whole property well and would even walk the 2 miles between our houses. Free-range kind of kids, you know. So it's way past dark, but we have a pole light near the house. It's summer, so it feels great outside, and we were all playing tag or playing hide-and-seek, running around. I ran around the corner of my house and I saw something white, like a flash, run behind the propane tank, then the well house. Our backyard was clear besides the well house and propane tank, and the woods are probably 150 yards away, so not a lot of places for an animal to hide. Ash saw it too. The kids were still playing and we thought it was a stray dog. And even though this thing was crazy fast, much faster than a dog, up to that point we had no reason to fear anything in the woods. We don't have any large predators around here. So we're like, "Oh, that poor dog, let's check it out." So we spread over around the well house, and that's where we see this crouched, white thing. I remember, it didn't have paws. It had long-fingered hands. It was matted and dirty and smelled like death. My mind couldn't even quite comprehend its face, but it had like a long, kind of upturned nose and no hair on its face. Like a snarling dog pig. I don't really remember the eyes, but they seemed to be black and yellow. All I really remember is they looked evil and inspired a fear that I hadn't known up to then. At that moment, we screamed and ran, and the thing dashed off into the woods as I looked over my shoulder. The kids heard us scream and knew something was wrong. We screamed at them to get in the house, and we locked the doors behind us. I couldn't keep my eyes off the back windows. Like, I didn't want to see it, but I had kids to protect, so I felt like I needed to know if it was there. We were scared and pumped with adrenaline, and we couldn't even speak about it. Finally, we got the kids calmed down and to bed, and then I talked with Ash, and she said that she had seen the same thing I did. My parents got home, and we broke down, freaking out, crying, and pointing at the well house. My stepdad even went out there with a gun. They told us it was probably just a feral hog and we were just tired or something. We never told anyone at school and never brought it up again. After the reunion, I asked my brother, who's 6 years younger than me, if he remembered that night that we saw a monster at Mom's old house. He said no, and I started talking about how I forgot until Ash brought it up, and how we saw something run behind the well house. He interrupts me then and asks, "Was it white?" I say, yeah. And he asks, did it have a face like a weird dog? And I nod. His eyes then got big, and he starts yelling, oh my God, I saw that thing down the road from there a few years ago. He said that he was driving the dirt road with his girlfriend at the time, hauling ass like always, but on the really rocky patches, he would hit the brakes and drive slow over the rocks. That's when he saw something in his headlights, standing about 10 feet from the ditch. So still that he thought someone had put up a weird statue out there. But its eyes followed him, and its face was sweaty. It was white but muddy. It had a dog face and long fingered hands, and was standing on 2 legs at least 6 feet tall. Its eyes followed him as he passed it, and he looked in the rearview mirror and saw it dash away into the trees. He asked his girlfriend if she saw it, and she just nodded. They never spoke of it again, and he never told anybody. He said that he was kind of shocked, and maybe he blocked it out until I brought up the monster at Mom's place. I stopped playing in the woods after that day in 2003, and started doing sports and, well, other teenage things. Ash stopped walking to my house, and eventually we grew apart. Now my brother and I are creeped out. I think I need to call my mom. Thanks for reading, Biker. Signed, Sabrina. Number 2. Hey, TB. About a year ago, I was out back with my family, and it was around 8 p.m. and the sun was setting. We lived in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere, and the closest neighbor was miles away. We live in Polk County, Iowa, so the area is pretty rural. Something down in the field kept catching my eye, but I ignored it at first. My sister saw it too and kept looking out towards the trees. She was starting to get freaked out about it. My mom said to go investigate, so me and my sister started to walk across the field toward the tree line. Big mistake. Now, it's hard for me to describe. This was the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. I didn't see it at first, and I didn't understand why my sister was so scared. When we were about 100 yards away, I saw this creature. It was tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet tall, a whitish humanoid with an elongated head. And this thing had no face. It had long arms and peeked at us through the tree line. We stopped there in our tracks, and we couldn't tell what it was. It took a few steps further out of the trees. It just stood there, swaying back and forth at me like some kind of weird praying mantis. Me and my sister then ran screaming back to the house where my mom stood. Jaw dropped. She had seen it too. I had never been so scared in my life. So we grabbed the binoculars and we continued to watch this terrifying creature peek in and out of the tree line, spying on us. My grandma thought that we all just had a wild imagination. The sun was almost gone now, and it was starting to get dark. And the darker it got, the more this thing moved, back and forth, along the trees. It was so terrifying, we went in for the night and locked everything up tight. I couldn't sleep that night. At some point, I heard scratching on the roof, and again a very loud bang and various noises coming from the barn. I was terrified that I would wake up to my animals missing. The next morning, my grandma asked if we heard the loud bang outside that night. She ended up taking my grandpa with her on the morning walk. I still have no idea what it was, and it still haunts me to this day. Signed, Mark. Number 3. Dear Tattooed Biker, back when I was in high school, my friend and I saw something that I've begun referring to as a crawler. This happened in Rossville, Illinois. Nighttime and in a cemetery. I think it was probably late summer or early fall because, well, I don't remember it being too cold out. It would have been around 2010, and I'm pretty sure the moon was full or close to it because the visibility was pretty good. My friend and I used to walk this loop. You see, we would leave our place and go down a block to a side road that led out to a park. We would then turn left and cut across the park to the side entrance of a cemetery. The cemetery and park sat on the very southwest corner of town. Beyond that were just woods and cornfields. If we went straight across the cemetery, it would take us to the other side road. That would then lead to Main Street, back to where her house was. We made it to the cemetery, and were walking the main drive that split the property in half. There was a sudden noise that made us both stop. My friend started laughing nervously, and asked if I too had heard the noise. I told her that I had seen what had made the noise. Over on our left, I had seen something running behind the headstones. It was down on all fours, but was definitely humanoid. It had extremely pale skin and no hair, and it looked so thin, almost emaciated. I remember it was so pale that it almost reflected the moonlight. And it moved so fast, way too fast for any human that I've ever seen on their hands and feet, that I really couldn't make out many details. It was in total profile, so I never saw the facial details, and the way it ran was animal-like as well, and that it had that gait where its feet came forward almost between or past its hands. You can watch a video of a big cat or a wild dog running to see what I mean. We were both completely terrified, and we just stood there, panicking, and listening to it moving around, just out of sight, while we called one of her friends to come meet us and take us the rest of the way home. Her friend, who was a typical high school boy, arrived and naturally wanted to stay in the cemetery and goof off for a while. For some reason, with him there acting dumb, it was less scary, but I remember that this thing just kept making these wide circles around us, always staying out of sight, but you could hear it as it moved. And occasionally it would come a bit closer, and then would seem to dart further away again. Eventually we left, and I spent a while researching it, and even reaching out to a paranormal group in Champaign for advice. The guy I talked to had never heard of it, but wanted to document what we saw. We met up with him and did an interview, but the group never did an investigation. Fast forward a few years, and now I'm living in Aurora, Colorado. I met one of my closest friends in or about 2012. We really hit it off because we were into the paranormal. When I eventually told him about what I seen, his jaw hit the floor. He told me that he had seen the same thing, and then he told me his story. He described exactly what I had seen, but he had seen it under a porch while living in Thornton. It was crouched down and squatting. He thinks maybe he startled it while it was eating something, because he said it was hunched over and it was holding something. He comes from a Navajo background, and when we first met, his best guess was a skinwalker or a wendigo. But then, and especially now, he said he had doubts about either of those things being the answer. He was dating a girl at the same time whose mom claimed to be a medium. She said that she thought it was something that someone woke up, and now it was angry. We both have serious doubts about that one. The strangest part came when he and I brought it up, and we both started having very intense nightmares about this thing. His were much worse than mine and lasted much longer. This was also punctuated by 6 months filled with a lot of bad luck and anxiety for both of us. I always sort of brushed this off as just us psyching ourselves out until I sent my story into a podcast. After it was read, another listener sent in their story, and they described what my friend had seen. They also described the sightings as being punctuated by nightmares. I couldn't write that off because he spoke about his nightmares in detail, and they matched my friend's nightmares exactly. I've never given out details of what actually happened in either of our dreams. I've read a ton of other stories by other users and people on the internet. I've dug through mounds of lore and cryptid lists, and I still don't feel like I have an answer to what this thing really is. My best guess at this point is that the nightmares aren't coincidental, and maybe this thing is even interdimensional. It seems like it can interact with the physical things around it, but I've never actually heard of anyone give a first-hand account of being physically attacked or even touched. I've speculated on what it could be for hours, and the only conclusion that I've come to is that I don't feel like there is an actual concrete answer. It doesn't act completely like this or that other cryptid. I think it might be something that's maybe been around and inspired other cryptids and paranormal tales, but I don't think it's a Wendigo, skinwalker, ghoul, etc. I just wanted to share. Signed, Nell. Number 4. Dear TB, my wife and I were returning from San Antonio, Texas on a Sunday night, sometime around May or June, and my wife had fallen asleep. So I turned up the radio and continued driving south, taking I-35 into Laredo. As we approached the north side of town, I turned the cruise control off and dropped down from 65 to 60 to negotiate the curve under the railroad bridge that crossed the interstate. I was in the right-hand lane as I came close to the bridge, and that's when I spotted what first looked like a homeless guy, completely naked and scuttling along the embankment of the road. He was skinny and pale-skinned, and his arms looked emaciated. As I passed him, I had a creepy feeling that something about this person was just, all wrong. The way he moved, as well as the way his arms and legs were more animalistic than human. With 26 years in law enforcement, I thought about stopping and going back to see what this guy was doing. However, with my wife along and it being close to midnight, I decided to just keep going, figuring the guy was just drunk. I told my wife about what I'd seen when we got home. She thought it sounded like some drunken guy living under the bridge. After finding your channel, I began listening when I had the chance. When you mentioned the crawler humanoids and described what people were reporting, I looked up images on the internet that are reported to be of this thing. And sure enough, that's exactly what I saw. The creature was parallel to the road, so I never saw its face or eyes, but the body shape was as close to the drawings as I care to get. Now, every time I approach that railroad bridge, I slow down and take a second look. So far, I've only seen it the one time. Signed, CJ.
And there it is. All the real cryptid encounter stories that I have for you tonight. So what were these strange creatures? I look forward to reading your thoughts and theories down in the comments section, but please, keep it respectful to the witnesses. And if you have a strange experience, or maybe an unexplained encounter that you'd like to share, just send it to the email address in the description and, well, your story may just wind up in a future video. Anyways, thanks for riding with me. I really appreciate you. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker.